everybody. Today we've got a great group of people here to talk to you about MLS Grid. Hopefully some of you have heard about this, but you're going to learn a lot more about the progress the company's made and how great it is to work with these folks. So I see a lot of MLS folks on the call today, so welcome everybody. And this really is dealing with some of the most important issues that MLSs deal with today. So let me introduce our panels. We've got Joseph Szurgi, who's the CEO of MLS Grid and a big Bills fan. Go Bills, Joseph. Maybe next year's our year. We've got Cass Herrin. He's the director of Data Services for Moxiworks and I guess I would call him a super user of MLS Grid. He works with them in many, many different markets on many different product solutions. And then not last, but certainly not least, we have Shelley Specchio, the CEO of MIBOR. I think the largest Indiana MLS, is that correct?
That's right.
Awesome. So the three of them are here today to tell us about this. So as I was mentioning earlier, there's providing data services really is probably the most important thing that MLSs do, in addition to, of course, providing access to MLS data for people to use, right? And as we all know, it's not an easy task, whether it be because of the individual needs as we're now we don't call them vendors anymore, we're calling them data consumers. So Cass is one of our data consumers. Thank you, Cass. Whether it be, a unique innovation that a broker might want to deliver through one of their companies, like a Moxiworks, or just simply to work with brokers that operate in multiple markets. We work with some brokerages at Wave Group that they're operating in regionally with 50 plus MLSs and Cass. I don't know, you're probably at 400 if I don't know the exact number, but it's probably at least 400, if not more. And what we hear, in fact, I just got off the phone a few minutes ago with a large brokerage that's rolling across the country. And they said, while RESO has made some great progress, and the idea of RESO, of standardizing things and killing off reps is moving down the road, the fact is there's still a lot of inconsistency in how you license data, what data is included, literally the knowledge and professionalism of the person at the MLS helping you, because some MLSs simply just don't have data services experts like a Cass or a Joseph, right? And it's hurting some MLS's reputation, because at the end of the day, brokers contribute information so that they can leverage it, right? That's the most important thing that MLS does, is it curates it, it cleans it, it makes sure that it's compliant with rules, with state law, et cetera, and to not pay attention to that as one of your most core important functions, frankly, is kind of a misservice sometimes to some of your customers. So MLS Grid is just one example. And I'm going to make one other point too that I hear all the time, doing lots of strategic plans even recently, is the motives are pure. And Shelley's going to talk about this, right? But this is owned by MLSs. That what is their job? Their job is to support their customers, right? It's not owned by a ever increasing in size for-profit entity that looks at real estate as just one of the things that they do. This is a core service, a core priority, and a group with Joseph and his team that does nothing but think about how to make data access easier, cleaner, faster, more compliant, et cetera, et cetera. So with that, I want to turn it over to Shelley to kind of just give us the background. Shelley, how did this thing happen? I know you're kind of one of the founding MLSs of this, but why did it come together?
Thanks, Marilyn, and thanks everybody for being here today. It's exciting to get to do this. So this is a topic I just love to talk about. The grid came together as sort of a think tank idea from like-minded MLS. It started out, it was actually called the Midwest Technology Platform in its very, very first iteration, because a bunch of the CEOs that we know from the Midwest came together with this idea. We couldn't keep that name because very quickly Tennessee and Anne Marie down in the Carolinas joined in, and so it was no longer a Midwest project. But it all came together with this idea of focusing on a single source of data coming out to the data consumers out of the MLS. So its purpose was just what you said. Its purpose was to improve the industry for the benefit of the members. That's what MLSs do, and that was what these great minds came together to talk about. And ultimately, it was they put their money where their mouth is. These I think we started off with 7 maybe MLSs that came together, and everybody went to our boards of directors, and we came in and we said, hey, we think we should invest in this, and we all pooled some money together and created this idea of being able to have a single source out to many vendors of all of our data. So we're all completely independent, as we are all independent minded people, as you know. This wasn't a political move at all. This was all about just coming together toward the common goal of improving the services. So I love the name grid, and Joseph will probably correct me because this is just the way I see it. I like that we named it grid because I imagine that my MIBOR data is in its own little box in this big grid, and IMRED's data is in another box, and Stellar's data is in another box, but you hook up the to pull the data out of that all in one pipe. But our data is all in its own little boxes. So I love that term, the grid. So anyway, it was highly conceptual at first. We eventually moved forward when we were able to bring the technology together, and it's been one of the best projects that I've been involved in my long career here. I think it's an excellent product, and I'm happy to answer lots of questions about it.
So let me throw one question at you that I hear a lot, Shelley, and I'm sure there'll be lots more. And everybody, by the way, I don't think I mentioned this, feel free to throw any questions you've got into the chat, because this group really does want to address what your challenges are. But one of the misperceptions I hear out there is that you have to buy in at some high level of capital investment to become or to participate in MLS Grid. Is that true?
Well, that's how it started. We all bought in money and created it.
Right.
It's different now. You don't have to come in as a founding owner anymore. And there is a buy-in, and there's a lot of ways that we can have conversations about that. There's a cost to it, which I think we'll talk about as we move forward. But the buy-in piece, I've heard a bunch of different ways that other MLSs have structured that, right? So some have just come in with a buy-in straight in. Others have grouped together. We have some of us have created through our boards of directors at our own MLSs, like almost a grant program or like a scholarship program where we could help bring our neighbors on board, because we think that we are so behind the concept here of creating these efficiencies that we want to bring our neighbors together. So I don't want anyone, especially right here at the beginning of this conversation, if anyone's thinking, oh, I have to buy in for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars or something, don't let that be the thing that stops you. There's a million ways to bring this together, and we just want to make sure we're having those conversations.
Perfect. Yeah, I want to make sure that people understood that, because it's not I've looked at it on the behalf of smaller MLSs, and it's not an onerous cost at all. So I want people to understand that. The other thing, just to get this right off the table, because sometimes this happens in our industry, we're not always completely trusting of one another. What's in it for the people that founded it? Do they get more money out of this? Do they get profit sharing out of this? Do they benefit from other MLSs participating, et cetera, et cetera?
All of those are no. We all pay the same amount of money. It's a per listing or a per member per month kind of pricing. And so I pay less than Stellar because we have about 10,000 members. Mary Jo at Stellar has about 85,000 members, I think. So everybody sort of pays to their because that creates the most I think transparent way to monitor, because it really ends up being consumption. And again, Joseph can speak to better how that works, but that's why we set it up as a per member per month sort of pricing, because that will help cover the consumption that's pulled out for the resources. But it's the owners don't get anything other than we were the first in, and so we have been enjoying the benefits of this the longest. And so nothing extra.
But there's no profit motive here. I just want that to be clear.
No, that's the point. Yeah, no profit.
Got it.
That's right. Okay. That's right. None at all. And it's not for sale. So if anyone's watching who thinks that they'd like to come and buy us out, we're not for sale. We're for, but we're very happy for other MLSs to join on.
Perfect. Okay, great. Next slide, Michael. So there's so many benefits to this thing. it just, I mean, as an MLS, someone that administers some of the smaller MLSs, like it seems like a kind of a no-brainer, to be honest. So I'm not going to use my bias, but I would love to have you, Shelley, explain what all of these different benefits are, about why, how did you engineer this, and why does it really help people?
Sure, thank you for that. And so we're we have the benefit of these. We live it every day. We're, like I said, we're about a 10,000 member sized MLS. We facilitate about 13 billion per year, so a good size, but not by any means in the like top 10 MLSs in the country. So we have a good, strong staff who do amazing professional work. But this category of the work is a challenge. I think there's nothing more important than us being good. I'm going to use the word protectors, but it's only because I can't think of a better word, but good stewards, let's use that, of our brokers' data, right? So we can't just let it go out willy-nilly. It takes some time to review requests for data to make sure that they're legitimate and that they're working with one of our brokers and blah, blah, blah. That takes a little bit of time. Brokers, from the broker's point of view, one of the pain points we heard all the time was, well, so-and-so MLS does it this way, and so-and-so MLS does it this. Can you just alter this a little bit so that I can make these rules work? Because everybody had their own rules. We all use NAR's IDX rules overall, but there are little changes here and there, and there's some options within NAR's rules and policies. And so that has always been a pain point. So we created this idea of one license agreement, one standardized rules, one standardized data feed. And it wasn't as hard as you think, because again, the MLSs that were involved, especially from the beginning, there were several of us. And so it wasn't like it was just me and my best friend could get together and agree to the rules. It was a big group of like-minded, but very forward-thinking and good business people. So, but we did come together pretty well with this uniform process. And it's just been really great. One of the powerful things that come from having it come through one source, one license. I mean, I think we'll talk further about benefits, I hope, that are there for the data consumers. I almost said vendors, but for data consumers. But for us, it was just knowing, it just relieved a lot of the work of reviewing constantly something that has already been reviewed by a bunch of my peers, but through one data standard. So it was very helpful for us. It didn't take away like we didn't free up whole many staff members, but the staff members that we did free up have they do their work differently as they used to for data. Yeah,
and so if somebody new comes in, and maybe this is a question for you, Joseph, but say someone on the call decides they want to join MLS Grid, they go through the licensing agreement or probably not the license agreement, but the standardized rules and regs and things. They have something they really want. Is there a method for them to air their interest and to discuss it with others?
Yeah. Hi, Joe Szurgi, MLS Grid. Quick introduction. Yes, go Bills. Thank you, Marilyn, for teeing that up. Yes, the answer to your question is yes. We try our best to standardize the license agreement, the IDX rules, the VOW rules. As Shelley mentioned, we all kind of start with what NAR dictates, and then we add what is necessary in our market from there. What we found working with the MLS Grid MLSs and kind of standardizing things is that there wasn't all that much difference market to market. The way that we held it, the way that we talked about it, that created the difficult, barrier of entry that everyone felt when they were trying to cross these lines between MLS and MLS, that the broker understands, the MLS understands, but the customer, the everyday human being who's looking for a home doesn't understand the difference between the two. So we were able to standardize all that. And if necessary, we can keep an addendum in place or a separate rule that is specific to your MLS. It allows you to have one set of rules and agreements, some standardization, but much like the RISO data dictionary, which we'll talk about later, it allows you to have that native control that ultimately you need in order to allow your brokers and your customers and consumers of data to have what's necessary to transact real estate in your neck of the woods.
Perfect. Okay, awesome. Shelley, back to you.
No, I can't say more than that. That's one of the best parts of being a part of MLS Grid is to being able to have it be uniform, but talk things through with the rest and really analyze how things are going. And then you do have the ability to make it personalized if there's something extra special. So yeah, excellent. What Joseph just did. That's exactly right.
So can you talk about the uniform compliance process? And as we talked about earlier, maybe explain the word compliance because it's a bit of a loaded word. Explain what we mean when we say compliance in the MLS Grid context.
Thank you. It is a loaded word a little bit because even when I presented this to my board, they were like, well, they're going to all of a sudden MLS Grid is going to be sending out violation notices. Our members don't want to have a violation notice from MLS Grid. I'm like, no, not that kind of compliance. But
Right.
even with a good sized staff, to create a process and create the time to go out and actually check for display compliance from IDX vendors, et cetera, from the data consumers, it's a lot of work, first of all, and also very redundant that all MLSs are doing it across the way, because once a vendor is displaying the data one way, they're going to display it that way on all the IDX sites that they do across the country, so if you can catch it once, then you don't have to catch it for each MLS, and you can use that time to sort of educate that data consumer on the display guidelines or the display rules that are enforced and to go from there. So I don't think in my career, I know that I have never had an employee whose job was to sit all day going out onto the internet and looking at these websites and finding compliance. How we generally found things that were at lack of compliance was when somebody stumbled across something and then they were horrified and then were like, how could you allow this to happen? And it was very reactive and not proactive. So again, I think that coming together as a group, we're able to have Joseph does this work and he checks the vendors, but also if one of us hears something, it rolls through the entire organization in one opportunity to make the correction with the vendor all at one time. So it's much more efficient, much efficient.
And then there's the fifth point is reducing costs and fostering innovation. How does that happen?
Well, I think that's a Joseph question, right?
Okay,
I think
I'll let him go. We'll have him.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, well, I mean, to me, five key important benefits, one of which isn't listed here, but it probably should be, or anybody on the call that does this knows. This work is kind of a pain in the butt, a lot of it, right? And the pain in the butt factor, we didn't put that one out here, but that's kind of something else that it helps fix, is just not having to deal with so many issues that can happen with so many different vendors and data consumers. Excuse me, I'm still learning too, Joseph. And just so many different ways that data and all these different feeds can somehow get, a little goofy.
And Marilyn, that pain in the butt, that costs money too.
Sure
pain
does.
in the butt factors cost money. And so while there is a cost for this now, which, and I'm sure people watching will say, well, I don't pay anything extra for my RETS feeds. But we all charge our own fees. We all set our own prices. There is no collusion through this. We do that. Each MLS sets their own fees to make it work for our own business model. And even we struggled with that right at first. We're like, well, wait a minute, this was an expense line for us before. But what was an expense line for us before was, again, all that time and just the hoping that our staff were diligent and using really paying attention to who we were licensing to, really checking to make sure that somebody who wasn't, I one time had a broker mad at me because he wanted to set up the IDX feed to be sent to an insurance agency's website, and then he would get all the leads. But you have to explain sometimes that you don't get to make the decision for the whole marketplace. We're happy to send your listings there, but not all of them, right?
Right.
And so if you don't have somebody who's doing that job and doing it diligently, then the data just can get out anywhere. And that is a pain in the butt, but it does cost you money. So having a little expense on this end that you could build into your fees on that end, has your staff working on other things that are more, they're just, I think, better use of your staff's time. So that pain in the butt thing, I just wanted to say that costs money. That is an actual expense, the pain in the butt expense.
Yeah, it's not a line item, but it's there for sure. Okay, next slide, Michael. Okay, Joseph, you wanna take us through this?
Sure. So Shelley and Marilyn were having a conversation about, how the grid started, but I think a better conversation to start having now is, what is the MLS grid today, right? We are, in a nutshell, designed, owned, operated, and participated in by MLSs for the purpose of managing the data feed process. It involves many, many steps, all, from registration, licensing, standardization to the RESO format. And then ultimately what I think is one of the most important things that we do on the back end is the data monitoring that we do. We provide transparency for the MLSs. They know when their data is being requested, where it's going, how it's being used. And I think as Shelley and Marilyn were talking about the pain in the butt factor, the reality is, by providing that transparency, MLS staff and data consumers, because we provide the exact same transparency to the data consumer, they know where they sit in the process. There's no more, who's taken my email? Where am I? Who am I waiting on? Have they signed this document and faxed it to me? Have they, where am I in this process? Why is this taking so long? We process all of these data license requests from beginning to end. We do it online, and we provide the same level of transparency to the data consumer organization, the broker, should they choose to create an account with us, all the way to the MLS administrator, who ultimately reviews and approves the request. So, and that transparency and the addition of the personalized service that we try to add to everything, our response rate, the fact that our support team is more than willing to answer any questions from broker, agent, vendor, whomever, data consumer, whomever. We're always willing to pick up the phone and have a one-on-one conversation. We're available all the time to answer any questions you may have. And that level of concierge type service, I think, helps set us apart from the back and forth email conversation that you may have on an everyday basis. That transparency, the data dictionary, RESO certification, the API certification with RESO, it ultimately, speeds the delivery of these products from licensing to the broker actually receiving and being able to use the service that they want. It speeds that process along.
So in effect, you're kind of soups to nut data administering. You take that burden off of the MLS. The MLS still has the right to approve the licensing feed, the data feed, right? They still do that. But beyond that, everything else you guys are taking care of. And are you doing billing for them too if they want to charge for an IDX feed?
We will offer to do that. You have the option of continuing to do it yourself. But I liken it a lot to, from a data consumer experience, it's a lot like checking out at Amazon. Your cart shows you everything that you are paying for, and you receive one monthly bill from the MLS Grid. We collect it, but we immediately remit that payment back to the participating MLSs on a monthly basis. It's not our licensing fee. It's yours. You're charging it. We're merely administering it on your behalf. And we don't charge anything above and beyond what you charge in your data licensing.
So that's another point, is like, you're not siphoning money off the top of data feeds. Your job is to enable this for one flatly per member per month fee, and that's it.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, we use a third-party payment processor, and like when you use a credit card at any place, you know, American Express gets their 1%, you know, every time you swipe your card.
Right.
And so does our payment processor, but the remaining portion of it belongs to you.
But you're not taking a processing fee or management fee.
No,
That's the point.
that's not what we're here for.
Right.
We want to be your data cooperative. We want to be here to assist and support you in this process. We know that from experience on, you know, our staff has been on both sides, both the data consumer side and the MLS side for many, many years. We know how difficult a transition like this can be. And all we're trying to do is ease that transition.
And Cass, we're going to ask you a real quick question here. You've obviously worked with MLS Grid, you've worked with, I'm sure, with other data providers, because this is not in every market yet. Does this centralization and this data co-op concept Joseph described, is that helpful to you as a data consumer?
Yeah, I don't think I can really describe how helpful it is. So we, you know, I've been doing this for over 20 years. And so I've seen the evolution from flat files on FTP servers to a million different flavors of RET to, you know, now we're getting into the RESA Web API. And it makes a massive difference in the, what was it called? The pain in the butt factor that everyone has to deal with. You know, just as one example, you were talking about compliance earlier. And, you know, I'm a big believer that most of the data consumers out there don't want to be out of compliance. They don't want to be have inaccurate data. We want to be good stewards of the data like everybody else. But typically when there is a problem, it's because of complexity, not because of bad intentions. And what MLS Grid does is they make it very easy for us. You know, if we have 4 MLSs that are in MLS Grid right now and we get a 5th, there's a lot of work that we don't have to do because it's been done already. We know the mappings are accurate because they've run through, you know, millions of listings and other MLSs already. We know, you know, the sort of the subtle nuances of bringing a new MLS into a system have already been handled, and we've already automated a lot of that, which leads to greater accuracy. So both from the, you know, the brokerages and the agents' point of view, it leads to better data, but it also helps the MLS because it's more likely that we're not going to be doing something with the data that we shouldn't.
Yeah, it's just like, to me, the simplest way to look at this is there's 500 and whatever number of MLSs every day. It's a different number.
Yeah.
And
how many are there, by the way?
I've heard 586, but I don't know. Okay. You probably know better. Anyway, we're replicating the same process 586 times.
Yep.
And the simplest definition of this is when you do it together, you learn things faster, you get there faster, you do it once instead of, so once you've gotten up to date with one MLS, if another MLS calls you and says, hey, I got a broker that wants Moxiworks, you're like, done, right? It's like, it's so much faster. So it helps every MLS, frankly, in my view, become better, because when a broker asks you for something, and Joseph's going to talk, there's a lot of people like Moxiworks that are already on this. It just makes your life, you can get to them faster, you can get it done more seamlessly, easily. They understand what an API is, because a lot of vendors will tell you they do and they really don't. But if they don't, I've heard Joseph do it more than once. You'll be like, all right, let me walk you through what that really means and how to get there. So he's advocating on behalf of brokers, even when he's not getting paid for it. He's just doing it because it's the right thing to do. So it's a way of, instead of replicating it over and over and over and over and over, do it once, do it well, do it right, do it simply, and get on with it. Anyway, okay, next slide. Okay, Joseph, you want to talk about your network here?
Sure. So I think Shelley, you know, kind of teed it off with how we had our roots in 2015. It did start as a discussion amongst MLSs in the Midwest about how they could simplify the process. They had overlapping markets, you know, I mean, between Chicago and Indianapolis, you know, it is a space that, you know, frequently is the suburbs that, you know, all of your customers, you know, if you're a broker, may reside in. And that overlapping market and that confusion between the two created difficulty. Same between Chicago and St. Louis, you know. So the initial concept and idea was, how do we make that simpler, easier? As it turns out, not just within the Midwest, but across the nation, other MLSs like-minded realized that there was a need to break down that barrier of entry and work towards simplifying the process. And so we've managed to move from 7 MLSs originally now to 14 that are active, and several others that are in the process of coming on board with us as it stands today. And so our footprint started in the Midwest, but now, runs across the entire United States. And we service, based upon our MLSs and their size, we service roughly around 300,000, licensed agents today. And we now have about 1,300 different data consumer organizations who are familiar with the MLS Grid. That runs the gambit from Redfin and Compass from a brokerage standpoint to your real estate webmasters, your IDX broker, and your Moxiworks. It stands to reason that about 90% of your data consumers today have some understanding of the MLS Grid and familiarity with our process and our data. And that just simply speeds the process of their transition along.
So you don't have to, you're not being a pioneer anymore with this. You guys have done the hard work. So if a next market comes on, it's going to make the onboarding process a lot easier, because probably the bulk, what did you say? There's some high percentage that you see when you go to a new market that's already part of this. What was that number, Joseph? Roughly
about 90%. In our last couple of integrations, we've seen that roughly 90% of the data consumers who were previously on RETs are also consuming today data from the grid via API. So that transition over, as Cass mentioned, it makes life easier. That transition is not put on, the management of that transition is not the MLSs or the associations to bear. We bear the burden of that transition. It's what we do, and we do it very well. Yep. We've completed successful platform integrations to date with CoreLogic, Paragon, DynaConnections, Rapatoni, homegrown MLSs such as RealTrax that have written their MLS platform from the ground up. We know data and we know it well. So, I mean, I go and I look at smaller MLSs, and frankly, most are considered smaller in the context I'm going to describe, right? Most people don't have their own development teams on task. There's maybe 10, maybe 15, if I'm being generous, that have their own development teams. Most don't. And it gets even worse. If you're a small association MLS combo and you've got 1 or 2 staff members that run the entire association and the entire MLS, right? That's a very common scenario. There is no way your group's ever going to get anywhere close to the depth of understanding of data that Joseph's team has. There's just no way. You don't have the time. Even if that was your biggest passion in life, you were the most data-centric person in the world, there's just not enough hours in the day. There just isn't. It's just the reality. It's like fingers in the dike, right? You're trying to fill a million different jobs every single day, and this is just one of them. So these guys go deep, outsource it to them, and then they take it from there. Okay. Well, and that's where some of the cost savings comes in. I mean, you can literally, as Shelley mentioned, freeing up your staff's time to deal with your broker subscribers and what's pertinent to them, as opposed to chasing down a conversation with a data consumer or reviewing a website to see if indeed it was within compliance with IDX rules. That's time set aside from doing what is best for your broker subscribers, which is serving their needs. Exactly.
And Marilyn, we've had at Moxiworks, we've had a couple examples recently of smaller MLSs that decided to try to do RESO Web API on their own. And they talked to us. We were the main reason why they were converting. We were strongly recommended you need to use somebody who's already done this. That they chose not to, and in those cases, the implementations have not been successful. And it's not for lack of good intentions or even high quality tech people. It's just spinning up a full RESO Web API environment and managing and maintaining it is sort of a rare specialty. And there aren't that many organizations that can really do that well. And but that's really what's required right now, is that level. Consumers and brokerages are demanding a really high level of uptime, of quality data. And it's hard just to, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, you could sort of spin that up on your own, but it's pretty hard to do that now.
Yeah, I mean, if most of us said, gun to your head, go engineer a RESO web API, I know I would be dead in about 10 seconds.
Yeah, no,
Like most
yeah.
people.
I mean,
So-
we work with the RESO web APIs every day, and I don't think we would be able to do it easily.
Exactly. Okay, next slide. Okay, Joseph, tell us about how RETS is dying a slow, hard death.
So I'm sure everybody's heard over and over again, the National Association of Realtors and RESO, the Real Estate Standards Organization, they've come together and they've decided that RETS needs to go extinct. For those of you, the history of it, RETS goes back 25 years. It's VHS in an era of streaming services. In reality, it's long since past its life cycle. And RESO keeps an extinction countdown on their website. And you can see that URL there. They track MLSs that have successfully migrated their data consumers from RETS to a RESO certified API. And as it stands today, over 50% of their top 20 on their list are MLS Grid participants. And what we have successfully assisted 9-10 MLS into fully transitioning from RETS to API. From beginning to end, that transition can be daunting for anyone, and it can be implemented poorly. But our experience gets better with each transition, and we've speeded that process along. Recently, MIBOR, Shelley's organization, just recently transitioned their RETS data consumer off of RETS and fully onto the Grid's RESO certified API.
We spent about a year doing that. It wasn't like it just happened overnight. We just put it out to our data consumers that this was our intent, and we wanted to move people toward that right away. Anybody who was working in more than one market was very happy, and they just moved right on to the MLS Grid because they understood that they would be able to do that for their other markets that we share and pull in one poll to get all that data. But we spent the year and we just kept reminding them this is, it's a countdown and you have to get off RETS by this date certain. And our date certain was March 2022, and our last one's off. We only have the only RETS going out right now, which are also now transitioning, is our actual MLS partners. So like our showing service and our lockbox people, and now we're moving them over all onto MLS Grid 2, and we only have just a few left. I think we have like seven people left.
So Cass, from a practical, non-technical perspective, for most of us on the call that are not technical, why does this matter? Because I've heard some people say, why is NAR pushing this? Like, what difference does it make? What's a RETS versus an API, and why should I care? What does it mean in practical terms for operators that want to sell real estate? How does it help them?
Well, there are lots of reasons. So just at a high level, the uptime, the speed of those APIs, RESO Web API servers, just sort of the basic infrastructure is modern. It is, the comparison between VHS and streaming is really accurate. So we've converted in all of these markets you see here. We've done the conversion, and across the board in every case, the quality of data, the number of issues and complaints we have, and the frequency with which we pull images and data has gone up after we made that conversion. So at a really high level, that's what an end user is going to see. They're the perennial, hey, my listing doesn't have an image, or you missed a status update or something like that. That's just going to happen a lot less because you're dealing with a much more stable, robust system. And there's some other advantages that maybe people don't necessarily think about. RETS was entirely a real estate industry notion and technology. And we all work in a really competitive tech job market, and it's difficult to find people. It's difficult to find developers. With the RESO Web API, it adheres to sort of modern API standards. There's still a lot of sort of domain specific knowledge that's needed, but it's much easier to bring a new employee on and and say, okay, well, here's the documentation for the RESO Web API. Here's Grid's documentation for their implementation of the RESO Web API. And then they can look at it and go, okay, this makes sense, because we we often had trouble getting people interested in a job where they had to deal with RECs. So that's another factor.
So basically it's better marketing opportunities for brokerages and better chances for vendors or data consumers to bring the best talent to the real estate industry to work on this. Is that the simplest answer?
Absolutely. And it allows data consumers the ability to spend more of our time working on products rather than on data related issues. And that's a big deal.
Innovation versus bugs.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I like it. Okay, next slide. Joseph?
Well, I mean, I just kind of speaks towards the growth we've had in the last year as we've added an additional 5 MLSs of late, most recently RA Colorado. We see a significant number of data consumers that become familiar with the MLS Grid. Your tallest box is the total number of active accounts that receive data from us, and then accounts that are effectively pulling data from multiple MLSs from the grid, simplifying their process, is roughly 20%.
But it's probably
We see
the biggest 20% though, right? A lot of the bigger companies that operate.
Yeah, and that's what you see, as I mentioned before, when you're talking about data consumers who are familiar across multiple, markets, that's your 260 there in that number. That's your Redfin, your Compass, your Moxiworks, your IDX broker, your Showcase IDX. The list goes on. They're the ones that by name, your usual suspects, and that your brokers are using their services today. So their transition will be simple. That remaining difference between the 1272 and the 260, those are your local. Those are the folks that have taken the time to, over the years, integrate using RETs and are familiar with it, but still need to eventually transition. And that's one of the other things that we do, and we do very well, is we will, for lack of a better analogy, coach anybody through a transition from RETs to API, both using our services, conversations, Zoom meetings, calls, and our documentation. We try our best to give you the best foot forward in terms of understanding what that transition really means for you, and making it as seamless as possible, but removing that pain in the butt factor, not just from the staff point now, but now from a transition standpoint. It's very difficult for people to move from one thing that they've known for so long to another.
Well, and brokerages suffer from the same thing that MLSs do. Most brokerages don't have their own development teams either. And I think brokers are getting pretty well educated that they know that an API makes more sense. They technically don't understand why it makes more sense. But again, Joseph's filling in a hole for brokers that don't have that. They don't have a Cass, right? That needs to make that transition and knows that it can make their data better and their marketing opportunities better, but they don't know how to do it themselves. So you're playing a role for brokerages on behalf of all MLSs too, right?
Yeah, there's a space between the data consumer organization, the Moxiworks, the broker, and the MLS, and we're not interfering in that transaction. We're just trying to make it simpler, easier,
Exactly,
faster.
What do you want to do to that?
I want to jump in there to say that I hear all the time from some of my peers, like, well, nobody's asking for API. Nobody's asking for it. So my brokers aren't asking for this. And so this is why we took a year to get onto that extinction list, taking a year of working through there, because there is a large number of independents, and maybe the brokers weren't asking for it because it's going to be work and they don't know how to do it. But I can't say enough about how well Joseph and his team help those small independents transition over. And I think once they've had that conversation, once they understood, then they just tumbled over as fast as they could. So I don't want any of the people who are watching our presentation to think, oh yeah, but nobody's really asking for it, because they will. It is not as hard as they are afraid that it will be once they get together with Joseph and his team. And that is key, I think.
Well, and just to maybe to put a tougher line on that, that's what leadership's about, right? You guys are the data partners of brokerages. Brokerages are there to sell real estate. They're not here to be data experts. They don't know what they don't know. They don't know that an API will help them. They don't know that it will enable them to work with a Cass as opposed to a small, backyard garage shop. They don't know that stuff. So you as MLS partners of them and as data leaders, bringing it to them, they'll say thank you eventually. They just don't know what they don't know. Most brokerages have no idea. When you say API, they're like, I know that's good. I have no idea why. So, okay, next slide.
So we've touched on this a couple of different ways, but I mean, let's be clear. I mean, in the simplest of terms, what you are tasked with doing for your broker's data is, as an MLS or association that's providing this, is managing and monitoring data usage. And we touched on it earlier, the transparency that we provide from beginning to end is what we're really offering. The idea that you can monitor the transaction from the moment, we'll use Cass as an example, from the moment Cass asks for data through your approval process, you get to see when Cass asked, when the broker signed the agreement. Cass then gets to see and know when the MLS reviewed and approved it. So there's no confusion and there's no back and forth.
Yeah, so what does that mean for you, Shelley? How does this help you as because it's just one of the 7,000 things that MLSs are supposed to do on a daily basis. How does it help you?
Exactly right. It's that ripple effect. It's that I don't have to feel like I have to be as so vigilant that I catch every actor, because I know that I have a collaboration of my peers and a professional staff in place whose job is that, and they're looking toward that to oversee that kind of compliance and that data use and making sure that we're following along with our policies. And again, I keep going back to, I really think that our data consumers want to do it right. And so if they could just have if something is identified, then they'll fix it to be better. Nobody wants to take advantage. I mean, maybe some people do, I shouldn't say nobody, but we can identify them too through this collaboration and as a group. I can't say enough about that sense of community and that I don't have to be the one who's on the fence all the time guarding. I've got a group now that we can find things so much easier, so much more efficiently, and then so much more transparency about what the problem is and how we get it solved.
That's awesome. And Cass, from your perspective, is it nice to be able to go to one source? If you're working with 3 different markets and you've got different issues in different markets, does it make it easier to work with Joseph and his team directly?
Oh yeah, it makes a huge difference because the the monitoring of the data usage, for example, what the MLS sees, I see too. And so, Joseph and I have had conversations where we were Moxiworks was pulling more images than we should have. And the Grid worked with us hand in hand in a real cooperative way, and it ended up improving, life in our world and life, for Grid as well. And so there's a lot of insight into, let me put it this way, we don't necessarily see everything that's going on the other side of the fence. With Grid, we have more visibility into that, which gives us feedback on how our systems are working. And then we can improve on that. And that's something that was completely non-existent with RETS and really doesn't exist to this level, maybe with any other system.
Gotcha. Okay, next slide.
One of the things I think we talked about earlier, that consistency and that Cass stressed, the consistency in data and policies, that familiarity speeds the process along. There is a difference between data compliance and listing input compliance. We'll take on your data compliance for you. Listing input compliance, did the broker properly input information about the record. We leave to the MLS. It's your data. It's yours to safeguard and control. You're just asking us to help you manage that process as it moves downstream from you to the necessary vendor data consumers and other organizations that need it. Having that same set of rules that the MLS Grid negotiates with you and all our other participants allows the data consumer that consistency in policy. And that means common practices across the board, simplicity in display and usage, and what we call a ripple effect in terms of compliance. Should there be an issue with any data consumer organization on the grid, whether it's Shelley's staff catching it or staff in Chicago, the expectation is the same. Your correction, to that website or that application needs to be made across the board, not just in my market, but across the nation. So catching it once ensures that it's caught in multiple locales.
Well, one of the things we hear from brokers that operate in multiple MLS markets is that if there is a policy that's out of whack, out of inconsistent, lower level, depending on your perspective, right? And I'm in multiple MLSs as a broker, I have to take everybody's data quality down to that one level. Because if I don't have it everywhere, I can't use it anywhere, right? So you fix that problem for brokers that are, and there's many, and there's more and more, it seems like all the time operating in multiple markets, probably for just the need to continue to grow with so little inventory. I don't know, but do you see that? Does this help you, Cass, if you're working in that situation with a multi MLS market brokerage?
Oh, absolutely. So I think we're all aware of some of the NAR policy changes that are rolling out here in the next year. Historically, in order for us to implement that, we would have needed to, we're in 500 MLSs. So we would have needed to analyze and evaluate 500 different feeds and determine how to implement those rules within our own distinct sort of environment. When we're getting the data out of Grid, they make, the change that they make for a particular policy is the same across all MLSs. Now, maybe not each MLS implements that policy, and that's the MLS's discretion, but where they do implement it, when we receive it, it's the same, which means it's much easier for us to comply with that policy. It's something we can do a lot faster because we only have to do it once.
So we're getting a question from, I'll just leave it anonymous, from Kim at a small MLS. I'll point this back to you, Shelley. And she said that they tried to join Grid a few months ago, and then they found out there was an onboarding fee and it was too onerous for the size of their MLS and they were not able to do it. And you mentioned earlier about sponsoring or underwriting those fees. Can you talk a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, I don't want to speak for the other people in the MLS Grid, but I've heard that others besides MIBOR has done this. There is an onboarding fee, and Joseph can speak to the exact where we are with those numbers in case I mess it up. We all know how we feel when our board members start quoting things at our MLSs, right? So I'll let him quote the prices, but I know that some of our, like for us at MIBOR, we set aside money so that if an MLS near us in our market that would help create market efficiencies for our members wanted to come on, we would pay that onboarding fee on their behalf. I've also heard others have gone through other ways. A couple have joined together and come in together so they could share that if it happens all at once. But there's real cost associated with onboarding. It's not, again, I just keep going back to the MLS Grid is owned by MLSs, and we're not about making a buck. We're not trying to make a big profit. We're just trying to offset the real costs of onboarding and then of the data management. So Joseph, you could speak more to the cost, but yes, if someone wants to come on and they cannot have it fit into their budget, then we will talk to you, we and other MLSs, and see what makes sense for us, because we've all set aside money to help build this for our own markets.
So if you like this idea, I'm going to speak on your, just make sure I'm saying this right, Shelley. If you're on this call, you think this is a good idea, but you're afraid of that onboarding fee, don't stop there, because there may be people to help you get you through that gauntlet so that you can benefit from this.
Exactly.
Reach out to Joseph, and if you say, I would love to do it, but I can't, we just can't afford it, he might put a little consortium together for you or help you with that or whatever, but don't stop because of that fee.
Exactly. Don't stop
Yeah.
the conversation.
Perfect.
Joseph, maybe.
No, I mean, exactly right. I mean, recently we received some interest in the state of Kansas from a smaller association, and once we spoke with them, they reached out, not at our prompting. They reached out to surrounding associations and said, "Listen, this is something we're very interested in. We think it would benefit you as well, but we understand there's a barrier of entry when it comes to the cost necessary to fund this transition. Can't we just all get along, set politics aside for a moment, and move in a direction we all need to move in?" So we brought them all on together. There is an onboarding fee. It does fluctuate. It depends roughly on the size of your organization and how much, like as with anything, how much labor needs to be put into a successful move. Whether it's simply a 5-minute process or a 10-minute process or a 2-week or 5-week or 6-week process. We can't really determine that until we look at your data. I mean, everyone is unique. You're all unique organizations with your own needs, but as each MLS platform we become more familiar with, and as I said before, CoreLogic, Paragon, Rapatoni, Dyna connections, we gain efficiencies and we speed that process along, and that translates into how quickly we can get you on with the MLS grid and how little it falls back upon you in that transition process.
We're not at early adopter phase anymore. We're at mainstreaming phase. That's what I'm hearing you say. So if your organization's like, we don't go first, you're not going first, second, third, fourth, or fifth. You can come in and it's a lot safer bet than it would have been. Okay,
we're in the middle of that bell curve now.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not as scary as it used to be. Okay, next slide. We've just got a few minutes left, so if anybody has questions, feel free to throw them in there. But yeah, this is a good example of some of the people that are partners now. I
mean, the phrase "the usual suspects" comes to mind, but I mean, it's true. In all of those MLSs that we've integrated with, each time efficiencies are created, not just with the large, data consumer organizations we're familiar with, but some of the regional ones as well. The guys, the guy that hired a local marketing firm who had familiarity, they become familiar with us. And as an added benefit to that data consumer organization, once you know the MLS grid and our inner workings, how you get data from us, you're not stuck in your market. Because we operate nationwide, you as an organization now have the opportunity to expand your services. So today you may just service a broker in Nashville. Tomorrow you could expand and offer services in Indianapolis and in Charlotte, because that familiarity with the grid allows you to expand your business into multiple markets without that barrier of entry that comes from negotiating a new license agreement or wondering what that data quality might look like.
So you're in effect, I hear this word all the time. People call Wave Group. I have no idea why they think we have this power, because we clearly don't. They'll say, well, can you just get me a data feed from all the markets across the country? And we're like, no, we can't. But in effect, this is the closest thing I've heard to that. What I hear people calling it is the easy button. For these markets, you've created an easy button. Not for all markets, but for these markets, right?
Yeah, we've made it easier for you to get through that process. I think it's important to note that we don't supersede an MLS's authority at all. We act as a gatekeeper. Shelley said previously, steward.
Right.
We're there as the steward of your data, and we'll help streamline that process. But ultimately, command and control of who gets data and how is ultimately your decision. We don't ever supersede an MLS's authority, and we don't commingle your data. Shelley's analogy of it's a grid, and we sit here and we sit there, but somehow we're all connected, really makes sense. I came to the MLS industry having previously worked at Utah Power and Light, the electric company, and the grid analogy makes a lot of sense.
Awesome. Okay. Let's keep going. We're just at the top of the hour. So I think we kind of already talked about these questions, but if you want to add anything to that, Cass, if there are other types of data consumers on the call that might want to understand your experience, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, since we're almost done, I'll just say real quickly, I think we've talked about all the advantages of Grid. The one thing I just want to remind everyone, back to that RETS extension countdown, I mean, it's happening, and whether you do it this year, which is I think is the mandate, or whether it happens, later, RETS is only going to get less and less functional over time. And so, and the decision is sort of not if, but when you make that conversion to the RESA Web API. And what I can say is, when I'm looking at the list of work we're going to be doing in the next year, majority of the work that we're doing related to MLSs are conversions from RETS to RESA Web API. And when we see one from that's going to be covered by MLS Grid, we know with a high level of certainty that that's going to happen quickly. Data quality is going to improve, and it's going to really be little or no impact to the end user. And so I just think for your customers, for your brokerage and agent customers, making this transition is, I mean, you're going to have to do it, but if you go with MLS Grid, the likelihood of it being smooth is very high.
Awesome. Okay, next slide. So I guess my question to you guys is, since we're at the top of the hour, is Joseph, if someone wants to learn more about MLS Grid, maybe Michael, you can put this into the chat. Where should they reach out to?
Info@mlsgrid.com is a good starting point.
Okay.
And you can always give us a call, and my cell phone number is there, and feel free to give me a call. I'm happy to chat with you. I am, Cass will tell you, I am really passionate about talking about this, and I will bend your ear about data quality. And it's just something that I've since I got in the MLS industry over 15 years ago, it's something that has been, an interesting soapbox for me to stand on. And I love the direction that we've been going in this industry of late. In the last few years, simplicity is key. It's what the consumer demands. And I like giving that simplicity both to the MLS and the data consumer.
So Data Crusader, that's what we're gonna a big deep on your chest.
That one's a bit big. Let's go with advocate.
That's who you are. And can I just point out that he gave us his cell phone? Do you know other big public companies that give out cell phones? No.
That's right.
There's a great example. Okay, Shelley, give you the final word. What's your advice, suggestions for those that are on the call that are thinking maybe this is a good path for them?
I think that the MLS Grid it just only simplifies the MLS data licensing and delivery system for your brokers. And so we're all here to make the market work for our brokers. And this is just one of the best ways that you can get that accomplished with the least work for the MLS.
A quick question that just came in from Jack Wagon. Joseph, is data sharing between two MLSs something the MLS Grid can facilitate as well?
Yes. As a matter of fact, we're actually in the process of facilitating that between two of our MLS participants, Chicago and Minneapolis. We're working on a data share in conjunction with their MLS software providers. Awesome. They're using different platforms, but the grid, and this is something that I think gets lost in everything. This move, RESO's move, NAR's move towards pushing API facilitates that and makes it so much easier, And so now two large regional MLSs can talk to each other without having to fumble through the process.
And millions of dollars later, sometimes it was real expensive to do that in earlier days.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, if you have information or interest in data sharing, a whole other reason to talk, definitely reach out to info@MLS Grid or support at MLS Grid, or call Joseph's at 10 a.m. or 10 p.m. on his cell phone, because he loves
Mountain time.
All right, guys, thank you so much. Any other questions from the panel, from the audience before we cut off for today? I think we had quite a few, but again, if you have more, or if you have questions like we talked about with affordability, please do not stop. Reach out to info. Oh geez, now we got a really meaty question for you at the very end from Tanya. What's the difference between MLS Grid and Trestle?
We're both offering APIs. We
Okay.
both do our best to standardize towards that RESO data dictionary.
Okay.
As an aside, we both use Stripe as our third-party payment processor.
Okay.
The major difference, I guess I would say, is that we're MLS owned and operated. We're for the benefit of the MLS. What we do is defined by the benefits we provide to our MLS participants, not by shareholders or market price or what Wall Street may be doing at that particular moment in time. We're about simplifying the process from beginning to end. We're not reselling your data. We have no control over your data other than that which you give us.
Yeah, so there's no derivative products being created here at all.
No.
And
No
there's not,
additional fees.
and there's no profit motive here. This is
Right.
this is a cost plus just to keep the doors open kind of model. It's not, you're not trying to create it. And just for those that don't know, because I find out a lot of people don't, Trestle is owned by CoreLogic. CoreLogic is now owned by Stone Point Capital. It is not an independent company anymore. So yes, there was CoreLogic had a profit motive. Now there's yet another level on top of that of a group that owns, I think they've invested $21 billion in real estate, insurance, mortgage, financial services, et cetera, et cetera. We are just one of many of the tools that they operate now. So the ownership structure of Trestle via CoreLogic, via Stone Point is very, very different than MLS Grid, which is, 10 MLS is sitting in a room saying what's the right thing to do for brokers. Very different. Okay, guys, thank you very much. Awesome, very, very informative. Hopefully the folks on the call found it interesting. And again, if you have more information or more questions, info at MLS Grid or call Joseph and they will take it from there. Have a great day, everybody.
And if any of you are going to be at RESO next week, I'm the bald guy with the Santa Claus beard. Come find me.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Thanks everyone.
Have a good
Thank
day.
you.
Bye.